You are listening to the After the Timeout podcast, hosted by Todd Zazadil and Jon Pilicki, two high school head coaches looking to help others spread their passion for the game of basketball. Tune in for episodes about anything basketball related, on the court, off the court, and anything in between. We at the After the Timeout podcast would like to take a full time out to talk about VREPS basketball. Coaches, do you get frustrated by how some players just cannot seem to learn your offensive system? Are you spending countless hours teaching your offensive system to your team just for them to forget by the next practice? You should check out VREPS. VREPS was founded by basketball players and coaches to create tools that make learning plays easily a reality. VREPS allows coaches to turn their 2D playbook into a 3D interactive video game that players can watch on any mobile device on their own time. Don't just have players watch film, have them live it and control the players so that they have a better, more efficient learning experience. It's free to try. Go to vreps.us to sign up today. All right, on today's episode, we are joined by Brian Schaeffer, the new head baseball coach of the Oswego baseball program in Oswego, Illinois. Coach, how you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Oswego East, by the way. Got to throw that in there.
Yeah, that's right. Oswego East.
All right, Coach. So, we've had some strength guys on. We've had some, mental game coaches on, but we're kind of dabbling into baseball for the first time, and you obviously played multiple sports and things like that. But going into your first year here as a head coach, what was the first thing that you're like, oh yeah, I'm a head coach now? What was the first thing that popped like, oh yeah, I gotta do this, or this is different than before?
Yeah, I think the first thing that kind of put it into perspective was when I started getting phone calls from like the local newspaper reporters. As a sophomore level coach or a freshman coach, you let that leave that to the head coach, and they deal with all that stuff. And all of a sudden I'm getting these calls. Oh, can we set up an interview? And that was something definitely new. And I knew it was something that I'd have to do in the season and talk after games and whatnot. But that was, oh, wow, I guess I am here type moment. And then getting it sent to me by, family members and staff members and stuff like that. That was pretty exciting.
Yeah. And then you're always kind of looking at like, okay, did I say the right thing here? Do I sound like a goofball or
the coach speak?
Yeah. Right. You got to get the cliches down and everything like that. And then I talk about all my kids, and, I remember I tried to do that. We had a little interview and they were asking me, I was trying to get all my kids in to make sure, basketball's a little bit easier, right? I only have like 12 guys, but, just trying to start that season off. Right. So, So, okay, now, being named the head coach and coming in, what are like your 2 or 3 non-negotiables, or the things that you wanted to accomplish right off the bat to put your stamp on the program, to kind of make it yours and your own, as opposed to the previous coaches?
Yeah, I think over the past decade or so, our Oswego East program has been going in a right direction, and we've had a lot of success. We've had a lot of great players come through, great kids come through. I just think the big things that I want to make sure that we have is, one, continue to really build that community support. I know you guys know that these kids are coming in from all these different programs, from summer ball and all of these other things. And I want to make sure that, one, we have a cohesive set of kids coming in, whether that be creating a feeder program or at least doing something with the different travel systems in the area, so that kids are hearing the same things throughout, and really making that connection with that community, that travel ball community, because I know it's so important for those kids right now in their culture and that type of stuff. So that is one. I think family buy-in is another one, making sure that you have that I have that connection with the parents and with the stakeholders in the program. That's something I think is key. I've already been reaching out to families and making sure that they know who I am. And I mean, we're going to be having, our season doesn't start until March, but we're already going to be having our first parent meeting here in a little bit, and making sure that those connections. And then the last thing, and I know we'll talk about it, but like setting up a culture that is mine. Because I'm much different than the last coach. I'm much different than the coach before that. And I got to be myself and setting up that culture of fun and bringing kids in to just have fun. It's baseball, it's a game, and that's what we need to be doing. We need to be having fun and being good people throughout the way.
So I wanted to follow up just on something you said, because, you know, Todd and I have obviously run high school programs of our own, and it's an interesting question. You kind of right now we're in that honeymoon period with the parents where, you know, you're the new guy. You haven't made any decisions, so they love every decision so far you've made because you've made none. So kind of how do you start to build that bridge with parents? You know, if our listeners are a new head coach, you know, what would you say to them about kind of building that bridge with the parents now? So then in those rockier moments, that bridge doesn't collapse.
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky that I've known everybody in this program for quite a while. I mean, this is my 10th year at East, and I've been in the program at various levels, whether it be freshman or sophomore. There's only one group currently that I have not coached in the program. So it's easier for me because I have that connection already, that I know the parents. But if I were to be coming in and I didn't know the parents, I'd say the biggest thing is just communication, being open, being honest, communicating frequently, and whether that's about what's going on in the off season or the process in the season. That would be my approach to it. It's served me well coming into different levels just in the past. But I'm in a unique situation that I've known most of these families for quite some time, so that's helped. And yeah, like you said, I'm in the honeymoon period, so give it 6 months, and we might be having a different conversation about certain things. But you know, I'd like to think that we have that relationship, that open, honest, truthful, with that community.
So let's kind of turn it, and you and I have obviously had conversations about this, but you know, you were a multi-sport athlete, 3 sports, all 4 years. There's so much specialization now, you know, as a 3-sport athlete, you know, what are the things that the athletes can learn best by playing 3 sports? And kind of going into that specialization, so kind of a 2-parter to start. Why is there so much specialization now? That wasn't like this even 10, 15 years ago. I know all 3 of us are going to all sound old now, but you know, so kind of 2 things, you know, what are things that you think athletes are missing out on by not playing 3 sports? And then kind of let's go into why so much specialization.
I think what they're missing out on, one is just experience, different experiences. That if they're competing in other programs, they're dealing with adversity, they're dealing with collaboration, they're dealing with different types of teamwork. It's skills that are intangible skills, not so much that those measurables. I think that they're missing out on quite a bit. I mean, the athletic part and the physical part, it plays a role regardless, no matter what. Whether you're a baseball player and you used to do wrestling, but now you're focusing on baseball, you're missing out on that physical aspect of developing those skill sets, the weight training and those quick movement type things. If you're basketball, you're missing some of that cardio and those things. But I think really those intangibles are what the kids are missing out on when they start to specialize. Seeing the different things, being able to work with a different coach, different style, communicate effectively for different things, putting themselves into different roles and responsibilities, all those types of things. I think that in the long run is going to be what they're missing out most of. And as far as why I think it's become so specific, I think it's the promise that they're going to be going to a college, a Division I, II college. I mean, these programs will say we can get you into college, and that if you focus on us, and then now they're paying $3,000 every 5 months or so, and they're focusing really on that. I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, and those people are skilled in what they teach and what they go about, but it becomes the focus when you're putting that much money into those types of things. So I really think it's that promise of, here's the top of the hill. You're going to get to it if you focus on this.
All right, so I'm going to add to this question a little bit because you just mentioned it. You mentioned, the AAU programs like basketball, travel baseball programs. Even football now has 7-on-7s, right? So the first part of that is we'll talk about that outside first, and I want to talk about inside your school working with other coaches. But with those outside groups, how do you work to mesh that, right? Because there's times where guys are throwing here and then they're coming to you, and especially early, depending on the training period and things like that. So, what are some ways you can mesh that? Because I think that applies to every sport, right? Trying to establish those relationships and working with the kids and working with various programs in the area.
Yeah, well, coming into this, I think it's just that communication is absolutely key. And I mean, baseball is a little bit more unique when it comes to like pitching, that very specific. Your kid's going to get hurt if he pitches too much and is throwing too hard too early. I tell my athletes all the time, I want you to be in the gym, but be smart and take time off from throwing. You need that. Your body needs that recovery. But that if they're communicating with me, parents understand the expectation and the realities of what can happen. I think that's important. But then, I mean, it's going to be my job to also be making those connections with those specialized coaches, and just putting out there, hey, we're going to be doing this, and this in the off season. If you could just be open with what you're doing so that we don't overtax these kids or put them in a situation where they're going to get hurt or put themselves in a position to be unsuccessful. I think that's going to be the end goal. But yeah, I mean, the difficult thing is they are getting this coaching and outside stuff. So it's that communication with the kids too, is what are you doing? How are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And then I'm going to be here to facilitate and support and build on that.
Okay. So then let's move it to inside your building at Oswego East. Baseball is obviously a spring sport. I played ball all the way through college, coached it, and it just seems that, it's very hard as a program to have a whole team of just baseball athletes, right? It's just, if you really want to be successful, you're going to have some of those other guys. And baseball being the last one, how do you work with those guys, those football guys, right? Because there's lifting, right? The football guys are as soon as they're done, right? January, December, they're going to lift. And basketball guys, a long season overlap. Basketball runs right into baseball a lot of times. So how are you working in your building with those coaches to kind of maximize all of your programs and help each other out?
Yeah, I think what East has developed really well over the past, I'd say, by 6-7 years, they really put a focus on it, is a strength and conditioning program that transcends all the sports. And you're going to have your in-season lifting that's sport specific, and that's great. And when they're in their sport, they're in their sport. I want kids to be, a basketball kid. I would love to have them at open gym in the morning at 5 o'clock to put in work with the baseball team and be with the guys and all that stuff to help develop culture. But his responsibility and his priority should be basketball. He's signed into doing basketball. He's made the team. That should be number one focus. So in season, that's their priority. And I'll have if they show up, I'll have a conversation with them, and I'll say, your priority needs to be your sport that you are in. I get that you might like basketball more than wrestling or football or whatever, but this is your priority. And then as far as like in between, working with the coaches, the football guys, do a great job of communicating with us and doing more specific lifts, more core type lifts in the off season, agility things. And I mean, they're doing that regardless, in addition to some of the weight training, but just more baseball specific and supporting what we're also trying to do in our programs as well. But I think like with basketball, that period that overlaps with baseball, it's playoffs. They shouldn't be thinking about baseball until basketball's done. That's number one priority. That's their season. That's what they got to be doing. But then at the flip side, once baseball starts, that switch has got to turn. It's baseball number one priority when it comes to extracurriculars and supporting what we're doing.
So I kind of wanted to turn it now. Obviously, we're a primarily basketball podcast, and you were a basketball player and coach yourself for a long time. So, having coached both, what were things that you used to coach each sport? What were maybe, obviously there's a lot of differences. So let's focus on what were some of the similarities to coaching both? As Todd and you both said, they kind of flow right into each other. So what were some of those same skills, even though the games are obviously much different, that you used with the players, with your team?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the same things that I did for practices from one sport to another are going to be how I approach the sport, meaning having conversation with the kid, making sure I talk to every single kid every single day. Clearly communicate what I want, have clear goals for each practice, have a clear plan, involve assistant coaches, all of those types of things. And then when it comes to game, I mean, games are wildly different in pace and those types of things. But like understanding your personnel, knowing who needs to be where, and thinking about certain situations. I mean, I have more time in between an inning to try and figure it out than in a timeout to figure out personnel and those types of things. But the similar, where a guy goes in the lineup, who he should hit behind, thinking ahead about certain situations. End of the game, guy on second, we're on defense, high ball game. What bunt defense am I in? Like, we got to practice those types of things and make sure that we're set. Our execution is good. It's the same. I thought those were very similar, making sure that you can execute your offensive play, you can execute your out of bounds, you can execute the end of the period or the end of the quarter play. Same thing with baseball. You can execute a bunt defense, you can execute a bunt, you can execute at the end of a game what we're trying to do, the defensive plays and those types of things. Thinking ahead and being prepped, I think that's the big thing, and personnel. And those were the biggest similarities, and then how I approached each game in practice.
So you kind of mentioned the speed aspect, and there's a lot of talk even at the major league level of the speed and baseball not being as attractive to younger kids, right? I guess this kind of goes back to the other question of getting those three sports athletes and bringing them in. Using that basketball and football knowledge where it's kind of go. How can you use that knowledge to, I guess, kind of help recruit some guys to the baseball game, during the practice part, right? Because I think everybody likes to play games for the most part, right? The games are kind of fun, they compete, but where it gets you in baseball is the practice, right? Yeah. A lot of times it's just a different pace. You're not really playing the game, especially in Illinois when you're inside of a cage that's 10 by 60 and it's 5 o'clock in the morning and the guy's throwing 88 at you and you're like, oh boy, this is not so much fun, right? So how can we transfer some of those things over and make that part of the game fun too? Because like you said, you're trying to make baseball fun.
Yeah, make it fun. I remember practices where we'd be in a hallway hitting sock balls because we just don't have any space and whatnot. I mean, yeah, I think the big thing is make it fun, make it competitive, make everything competitive. I mean, that's kind of what you do in basketball. Everything's competitive. Everybody, if you're one-on-one or if you're doing certain drills, you make it competitive and kids get after it. And I think it's similar in baseball. You make it competitive. You put in certain drills like that. You switch things up. We like to do a lot of different types of games. I mean, kickball, like you're in the same format and everything, but it's something just a little bit different, and make sure we're being safe. Obviously, don't hurt each other, and do those types of things. But at the same time, make it meaningful, and don't have them there to be there. I mean, I think back to some practices of 3+ hours, and by hour 3, that competitiveness and that fun has ended, and we got another half hour of drills to go, and I'm not getting anything out of it. So making sure that when they're there, they're getting something. So I'm not afraid to tell the guys, hey, if it's not being meaningful after an hour and a half, we're going to call it. I'm not going to develop bad habits or waste your time doing something that's not going to be meaningful. So making sure we do those types of things. And then let them watch Major League Baseball and Bryce Harper and Jose Abreu and those guys hit bombs and do those cool things. Like, I mean, I think some of that is always beneficial too, and letting them come in and, but once they're in practice, do things fundamentally right.
I really like that quote, and I'm stealing that quote. It was, don't have them there to be there. I think that's really good for any coach. Like, get your work done and get out, because I think there's been so many times where if I tell the kids we're going for an hour, that's the hardest working hour that we've had the whole season. So I think that's so true. So I kind of wanted to shift it a little bit to kind of talk about, I think so often now we're seeing so many coaches step down or resign, and they're citing family reasons, and sports in high school have become so year round. I mean, let's be realistic. For a head coach, it's year round. It's summer, it's fall, it's spring. We've talked about all the preps. So what are things a high school head coach can do year round to make their program successful?
Yeah. I mean, it really is. And you want to do the off-season stuff to make sure that you're prepped for the season. And I think that's key for any program. And it's a lot. And I know you guys know, reach out to your assistant coaches and share some responsibility. I think one of the things that I really liked about Matt Engelhardt, our last head coach, is he really kind of divvied up and gave every coach some sort of responsibility throughout the off season, whether it be Monday defensive work or Wednesday hitting. So you're not there every day, but you're there once a day, just to try and break it up a little bit. But at the same time, be present in when you can, and be honest with why you're doing certain things, and tell them the why. But as far as limiting things, I mean, it really just depends on your program. I'm going to have 28 guys coming back that half of them play other sports, half of them don't. The half that don't want to make sure that they're in the building. So I'll make myself available, but I'll be set clear limits and boundaries of what we can and cannot do. And then having an amazing, wife who supports it is also key. So
I think the last part was the most important there, Tom.
Yeah, no doubt. So obviously baseball last year in Illinois resembled the most normal year out of all the sports. It was still very unusual, but I want to talk to you a little bit about coming off a COVID year. Even though you guys had a more normal year in baseball, you still had restrictions. You still had things you can do. You had some guys in the building, some guys not in the building. All the things on the bus, this, that, and the other. So how do you come back? And obviously you take it over, but how do you come back and just start building those standards and expectations in a more normal year, both in the classroom and your off-season stuff and on-field stuff? Because they step away, you kind of fall into some habits or maybe some things that weren't normal for these kids when they have their normal routine.
I think it's being available for them right now. making sure they're in the building, making sure that they're with us, the coaches, every for our schedule, whether it be weekly open fields or lifting or those types of things, and in a reasonable amount. But I want them to be exposed to our culture and the expectations I'm trying to set right away. But at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm communicating that with the parents too, to build parent buy-in and the player buy-in. I think that's going to be the most important. I mean, like you said, baseball was a little bit more lucky having the most normal of the seasons, or at least the spring sports. So we got some time with them, and we had the opportunity in the summer to work with them. So now it's just continuing to kind of push those expectations and culture that we want, and continue to be communicating that.
So you and myself and Todd and pretty much every guest we've had on has been coaching for a long time. All of us, at least over a decade. So if you could give a young coach, maybe it's their first year coach in high school or even grammar school or even college, two or three pieces of advice for somebody that's just starting out coaching high school, college, grammar school, what would you say to those young coaches in their very first year?
Oh man, there's a lot.
Wow. Yes, there is.
I think the biggest thing that, thinking personally of myself, is one, be willing to just take a breath, take a step back when you need to. My first year, I was living on my own. I was in Bloomington. I was a new teacher. First time I was a head coach, and I was putting so much stress on myself, just thinking, am I ready for this game? Am I prepped? I was staying late to watch film and take a step back. It's going to be okay. And that was freshman basketball. So I just needed to take a step. So one, just be willing to take a step back and take some time. I know you guys had Julie Fournier on not too long ago, but the mental health aspect is huge. And that's something that I wish I would have done as a new coach. Also, be willing to learn. New coach now, 13 years after I started coaching, I knew nothing then compared to now. It's kind of like teaching. You think back and, wow, I was not a good teacher when I first started teaching, but I've learned a lot of different things. It was the same for me for that. Be willing to learn, go to as many clinics and learn the sport and do those types of things. And then know the resources that you have and be willing to work with it. My first tryout, I had a new head varsity basketball coach, and I had asked him, do I have this? I had planned on doing form shooting and having guys on all the baskets and having 20 basketballs and 2 courts. And he said, oh yeah, you got everything you need. We got it. Don't worry about it. Show up, and I had 2 basketballs and 65 kids and 2 hoops. And well, I guess I got to revamp my day 1 tryout as a first year head coach with no assistant coaches. All right, let's do this.
Before Todd goes on to the next question, Todd and I understand this because we used to coach together as the sophomore and the freshman coach. And one day, for our listeners, we shared half a court with 3 hoops. And what did we have? Both of our teams combined, and we each had 1 hoop. So that was fun.
That's good. Good times. Got a lot done that day. All right, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty question here. You got a player, it comes up to you. It's like, Coach, I'm not playing enough. I'm not getting enough innings. On my team I play with in the summer, I pitched all the time, this, that, the other. And sometimes it's them just generally wondering, and sometimes it's them like, hey, what the heck's going on here? Like, I should be throwing. How do you, because again, it applies to any sport, and but how you having that conversation with that player, to kind of help them see, hey, this is where I see you now. This is where we're going.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, the conversations I had is focusing on what they can improve on. If say a pitcher, I should be throwing more innings. I do this, and this in the off season. I should be saying, I'm saying, awesome, but I want to see you develop a consistent changeup for a strike. I want to make sure that you're competing. I want to make sure that you are attacking early in the count, and those are some things that I think you should improve on. And when we get there, then we'll see what we can do. And then making sure that they know when you get that opportunity, you need to make the most of that opportunity. I tell at least my players all the time, in baseball or basketball, there's 9 guys on the field, or there's 5 guys on the court, and there are 22 of you or 18 of you. You're going to have to show it in practice. You're going to have to show it on the bench, at the end of the bench. You're going to have to know what you need to be doing to make the most of those opportunities. And then again, when we're not looking, what are you doing to get better? I understand that you want to play, but what are you doing to get better, and how are you doing that? Those types of conversations usually are how it takes place, and making sure that we're focusing on them and how they can improve, rather than the specifics of clock. I think that's important.
So before we move on to our last 2 segments, you kind of hit on something, and it's a big thing for me. So I'm just kind of curious in how you will define it. But you've talked about the word culture many times during our episode. You know, if you had to define your culture in one sentence, or even just an overall successful culture of any, it doesn't matter, whatever sports, coach is listening, how would you define a good culture, or maybe your specific culture, in 1 or 2 sentences?
Let me narrow my philosophy down to 1 or 2 sentences. Let's see.
Take the book.
I think I want a culture of kids who are high quality individuals who will work hard to become better. I want them to have fun in what they're doing and to be supportive of all of those around them. We are a team, and we need to support the team at all times. So 1 to 2 sentences, that's the best I could do.
That's all right. There was a lot of commas in there, semicolons. It turned into 1 sentence.
Yeah, and
That's
and
right.
There you go.
That's right.
Listen, I teach PE, so that was a perfectly fine sentence for
Done.
me. I'm good with it. I'm good with it.
Done. All right. So in our final 2 segments, the first one, we like to call it a 30-second timeout. You're a former basketball guy, as we joke with all of our guests. There's no referee in this timeout telling you that the timeout's got to be over. So if you go over 30 seconds, as we tell all of our guests, it's okay. But this is kind of where we give our guests their platform to talk about whatever they want, about their program, about something they're passionate about. It doesn't even have to be related to your program or sports or anything. An outside organization, a charity, a story from a season, a unique story, a funny story, whatever you want to talk to our listeners about for 30 seconds, the floor is yours.
Yeah. I think this was, looking over what you guys sent me, this was a difficult one for me, just thinking about it. But I think I kind of focused on making sure that the kids know that what they're doing is fun, and they should be having fun while they're doing it. It took me a little bit to realize how I was coaching and how I was coming off and what I was focusing on. Put extra stress on the kids and the players. And I go now into every single game with my pregame speech, and I always end it. The most important thing we should be doing today is having fun. Because if we're not having fun, we're not going to be competing at our best level. We're going to be thinking about what I did wrong, or focused on what's coming up. And when kids play their best, some of the coolest things that kids do are when they're having fun in a pickup game in off season, and those types of things. So having fun and really enjoying the game is something that I've really taken a focus on as a coach in recent times. So that's just something that I kept coming back to is just continuing to have fun. And like we talked about earlier, the specialization, I think some of that just enjoyment of the game is being lost, but because they're just constantly playing the same sport and doing those types of things. So getting back to that, just basics.
I think that's just good advice overall in life. Just have fun, enjoy what you're doing, right? I like that. That's super simple, but it's impactful. All right, so the last one is quick hitters. We're just gonna throw like random stuff at you. Whatever we got here. Answer any way you feel like. All right. So your favorite high school sports memory as an athlete?
Yeah. So I think Jon has some that I think he would think I would talk about. But thinking back on it, the things that I remember the most were during baseball season, junior, senior year, we had this shed that was behind the varsity field, and getting there real early and sitting back there and hanging out with the guys, the custodial staff and the maintenance crew. They cleared out a space that we could just sit in and spending time with our teammates. I mean, teammates were there. Jon was there. We hung out for hours at a time, pregame, postgame, weekends. Coach would open it up and we just kind of do this. I think I have vivid memories of those, and just remembering how fun that was. I think that was the things that I remember the most, and that were my favorite memories.
Not gonna lie, before I move on to the next one, listeners, he did once get a bloody nose guarding John Shire, so I'm just gonna throw that out there.
That I knew you were gonna think that was the one, and I wasn't a great player. I was a guy that you put in to get a charge, get a rebound, and I guess I took my job a little too serious that day.
No, that was awesome. All right, so best. I know you're a golfer, so your best or most memorable round as a golfer?
I mean, I'm not that good of a golfer. I'd say in a weekend tournament, I was just shooting lights out and shot I think it was like a 74, 75. It was good enough to place in. I mean, our golfers, I never placed, and I was able to do that. I mean, I was an 82 to 88, 18 round golfer. So to do something like that to me was unbelievable.
Yeah, he's not that good though.
Yeah, I would shoot 82 in 4 holes.
Right. See me on the front nine. All right. So you just had a newborn. What have you learned? What is the secret you've already learned from the little one?
Oh man, another one. How long do you guys got? Patience. That's been huge. I think just again to understand what I have, be able to put some things into some perspective. I was telling my wife I had just a rough day at work, and coming home and being with puts in this perspective. It made things better. And then of course, how to change a diaper. You learn that quick.
We got to learn those things.
Yeah, you got to figure that one out real quick, right?
So, all right. So we always like to ask some goofy ones. So favorite pregame meal, you can either do it when you were a player or a coach.
So now I currently struggle to eat pregame most of the time. I've always been somebody who's been kind of wound up prior to a game. So it's a little bit tougher for me to eat. I'd say if I do eat, basketball season, the game doesn't start until 5 or 5:30, depending on where we're playing. But Subway, it would be because it's a little bit easier. But back when we were players, I wish I could eat like this, but we would go to McDonald's or Burger King and get 6 cheeseburgers and then a bunch of candy, and then go play a basketball game. And I can't believe that I survived that with how I ate.
Very true. All
right. Favorite all-time Chicago Bear?
Brian Urlacher jumps to mind first. I got to see him play, and that was special. I would love to say wish I would have seen, Sweetness, but.
So we got throw 100 miles per hour or be able to hit 40 to 50 bombs.
Oh, I would throw 100 miles an hour all day.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because It's hard to hit 100 now, right? Like much harder to hit these days. All right, so I'm gonna go Cubs socks or other. All right, and then I have a second part of the question after you kind of tell me that one.
Which is my favorite?
Yeah, you go Cubs or Sox guy.
I'm a Sox guy.
All right, so I want you to think back teams of your youth, and not like superstars. What was your like favorite like random non-star like bench guy, like the guy you had like 84 baseball cards of because that's all you ever got, right? Because you never got superstars in the pack. You just got, like I think about like Paul Asemacher from the Cubs. I had like 800 of his cards because that's all you ever got.
I top of the head, I think I got 3. I got Joe Creedy. I loved watching Joe Creedy during those years. Aaron Rowand. I love just his heart, his attitude, his effort. And then Willie Harris, which is,
Harris.
I mean, he was a specialty guy, just came in, ran, hit, and did what he needed to do. But I mean, he was a big part of that 05 run, and it was special.
I was hoping for some Ray Durham. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, but he was more of a big guy.
Yeah, he was.
Cool, Coach. We really appreciate you jumping on. Helping us branch out to the different sports in the baseball's perspective. But it obviously all coaching translates over to all sports, and so we appreciate you coming on, joining us. Thank you so much, and have a great night.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast, hosted by Todd Zazadil and Jon Palicki. For more show content and upcoming episodes, follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout, or subscribe to our podcast for upcoming episodes. For show inquiries, you can email us at afterthetimeout@gmail.com. You can find all of our previous episodes on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast by searching After the Timeout. We appreciate you listening. Tune in next time for more basketball content on the court, off the court, and anything in between.